Welcome back. If you're joining me for the first time, my name is Dr. Ivy Branin. I'm a naturopathic doctor based in New York City, but I see patients exclusively using telehealth so that I can help patients, not just in the States, but all over the world, patients that have been struggling with women's health issues and hormonal imbalances. Today, I'm going to be talking about something that a lot of people might have either some embarrassment about, that's not something that they probably talk about definitely at the dinner table. I'm going to start talking about genital herpes. Some things that you can do naturally so that it doesn't control your life. So first off, how does herpes happen? What is the cause of genital herpes? So the cause of genital herpes is the herpes simplex virus. There's two types, 1 and 2. HSV1 is typically only causes oral herpes, so thinking about like cold sores, and then HSV2 is highly associated with genital herpes, though about a small percentage of patients who do have genital herpes will have it due to actually HSV1. Now, we typically would get HSV1 or 2 when we come in contact with the virus from another person, and during the times where they're most likely shedding a lot of viruses. So when does that happen? So you have what's called the prodrome phase, which is if you're thinking about oral herpes, it's that tingling phase. Similarly, when it comes to genital herpes, so that's a time when one can be very infectious, and then when there's actual lesions. Now, it is actually possible to contract HSV from another person even when they're not in an active outbreak, though you're highly more likely to contract it during an active outbreak. The HSV virus is related to a lot of other viruses that you might have heard of, EBV, which is Epstein-Barr virus, CMV, cytomegalovirus, and herpes zoster. Now, one of the things about herpes, and one of the reasons why probably if you're watching this video, you most likely have already had an outbreak. The unfortunate reality about herpes is that it is a virus that stays with you for the rest of your life. So if you're watching this and you're like, wait a minute, I read this blog, I'm following this this influencer that says that you can completely clear the virus. Well, with the knowledge base that we currently have, that is not the case. And so unless this person is in the running to get the Nobel Prize, sorry, spoiler alert, you will actually have the virus for the rest of your life. Now, the big thing is all about reoccurrence, because reality actually with both HSV1 and HSV2, it's possible actually to have these viruses for almost your whole life and never actually experience an outbreak. So it's more important than even how you even get the virus or how to avoid the virus, which honestly is pretty difficult, because almost I think it's about like anywhere from 70 to 90% of the population has one of these viruses. So probably if you're watching this, you probably already have this virus. The bigger thing is about our triggers. So first off, illnesses. So sometimes you might notice specifically whether it's a cold sore or genital herpes after a period of like the flu or the cold that you develop sores. Stress. So I would say of all the different triggers I'm going to be discussing today, stress is probably the most important one. In fact, I'm actually going to be doing a whole other video just talking about how stress is related to herpes. So stress is definitely a big trigger. Trauma, and what I'm talking about is physical trauma, also excessive sun exposure, certain diet, certain foods, specifically if you have a food sensitivity, food allergies, sexual activity, not just from a transmission point of view, but if we think about irritation and friction, and also disruption of vaginal flora, which there isn't as much of a correlation between robust vaginal flora and HSV as in my other video all on urinary tract infections, and then also menstruation, specifically looking at the luteal phase, which is the second half of the cycle, where progesterone is the dominant hormone. So progesterone tends to have very inflammatory properties, and also there can be changes in immune function at the second half of our cycle, because that's really at the essence of outbreaks, is about immune function. So when we think again about stress is a major disruptor of the immune system, plus also stress has an effect on sleep, and if we're not getting adequate sleep, also our immune system is gonna definitely suffer. And if you're wanting to know more about the connection between sleep and immune function, then I highly recommend you watch, I do have a sleep video all about that, and also what you can do to improve your sleep. So what are some of the symptoms that you might experience? Although you might be watching this video, you're like, I already know, because I already experienced it. So as I mentioned, first you have what's called the prodrome phase, and that is the symptoms that you experience prior to actually having the outbreak. And it typically feels like a tingling sensation. And the more that we can get in touch with our bodies and come to awareness of the prodrome phase, we can actually, that's like the best time to start a natural treatment so that you don't have the outbreak. If the prodrome, the tingling, lasts and you do have an outbreak, then what you're gonna see is painful, blistery sores, that what we call weep, meaning that they excrete fluid. Basically, it's basically just inflammatory medium. And one of the other secondary issues is that the blisters themselves could also get infected. So you could have, the initial herpes outbreak, then during that healing process, having another infection, thinking about specifically because on our skin, we have so much bacteria. So there's definitely a risk, for example, of getting a secondary staph infection if the blisters don't heal properly. So what are some things that we can do naturally? And again, I have to remind you that I'm not going to tell you how to eradicate the virus, because again, we do not know how that happens yet. There's a possible, maybe if you're watching this like 20, 30 years from now, you'll be like, oh man, now we know how to eradicate the virus. Sorry, not happening yet. So the big things are things to strengthen the immune system. So zinc, and I feel that zinc is very popular right now, specifically when we think about COVID, but zinc actually helps to inhibit the replication of the virus. And actually that's one of its functions when it comes to all viruses, is it helps to reduce the replication, because if we reduce the replication, we can better control it. Vitamin C, both orally and topically, although if you're gonna do topically, definitely message me and I can tell you some products, because you might not know what they are, can increase healing rate, specifically, again, as we mentioned before, starting as soon as possible when you feel the tingling. Probably one of the most known treatments when it comes to herpes is lysine. What is lysine? Lysine is one of our amino acids, and when taken in, well, there's two ways. So one, in either taking in high dosages or focusing on lysine, foods rich in lysine, which is interesting because typically I'm usually always telling patients not to have dairy, but actually dairy is actually a really good source of lysine. So lysine has natural antiviral activity against HSV. And the mechanism of it actually is that it reduces another amino acid, L-arginine. And so one strategy would be increasing actually probably twofold, increasing lysine while decreasing your food intake of arginine. And arginine is actually found in a lot of our very healthy foods like nuts and seeds, and and also seaweeds, which I love so much, chocolate. It's also found in a lot of our caffeine sources. So definitely is that lysine arginine balance. So one from a prevention of an outbreak, but also during an actual active outbreak. Another one of my favorites is monolaurin. So monolaurin is a fatty acid that comes actually from coconut. And one of the ways that it works is, one, it actually improves our cellular membranes, but also it reduces, again, viral shedding. So that's another thing to add. Thinking about also some of our topicals. So my favorite topicals when it comes to genital herpes, which again, a lot of these recommendations you can also definitely use for your average cold sore, because even, yes, it's HSV1 versus HSV2. When it comes to treatment, it's really not that much different. So topicals, lemon balm, also known as Melissa officinalis, and licorice. And I really like using products that have both of these topically. Definitely, as I've always mentioned in a lot of my videos, when it comes to a natural treatment, sometimes hitting it really strong and very frequent early on is the way to go. So doing about like 2 to 4 times a day. Both of these help to prevent the growth and replication of HSV. Now, one of the things that I did not mention yet, which is another topical that I really like to use, is lavender essential oil. Now, the only thing with lavender essential oil, it works like a charm, but it only works during the prodrome, meaning that as soon as you feel the tingling, adding 1 to 2 drops neat, meaning no other additives. I mean, you could probably mix it with like a carrier oil if you wanted to, but applying it 1 to 2 drops either on your lip, or it could burn a little bit, but can be really effective in just nipping in the bud so that you don't even have an outbreak to start with. The last thing, so we talked about some of the nutrients and some of the herbs and some of the topicals that I often recommend. I'm a naturopathic doctor, so diet is definitely everything. So I already talked a lot about reducing arginine foods and increasing lysine-rich foods, definitely during an outbreak, but that's actually even just maybe good practice, specifically if you've been finding yourself more susceptible to outbreaks, but not necessarily needing to be more extreme. The other thing we want to look at is what I typically just call immune disrupting substances. And it doesn't mean that you have to cut these out all the time, but definitely if you're experiencing an outbreak, or if you're somebody who is very prone to very often having outbreaks. So what are they? Sugar, because if you've watched any of my other videos, actually I have a whole video on immune support, that just by ingesting sugar actually reduces immune function temporarily by 50%. So definitely cutting out sugar, and that even includes things like agave and brown rice syrup and coconut sugar, really reducing or eliminating sugar. Fresh fruit is okay. Alcohol, so alcohol again has a big impact directly on immune function, and then indirectly because of its effect on cortisol levels and also blood sugar levels. And then lastly, caffeine. I love caffeine. I love my coffee in the morning, but being mindful of caffeine consumption, specifically if you are having an active outbreak. So I know that was a lot of information, and hopefully that was really helpful. If you like this video, don't forget to like it. And also, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. As I mentioned before, I have videos on immune health. I have videos on sleep. I just completed a whole series on menopause specific for sexual dysfunction. So if you want to be up to date on the most current naturopathic remedies specifically for women's health, I highly encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much, everyone. Again, my name is Dr. Ivy Branin. I'm a naturopathic doctor in New York City, and looking forward to seeing you next time. Have a great day.